The first thing my mother did was bypass my face entirely, her gaze locking onto my boots. Not my eyes, not my hands, and certainly not the duffel bag digging into my shoulder after 3 flights, 2 layovers, and a military transport that smelled of diesel, stale coffee, and quiet regret. Just my boots. They were, of course, impeccable. I'd spent 20 minutes in the Logan Airport restroom buffing them while a woman in a Yale sweatshirt washed glitter off her fingers, pretending she didn't see me. My Army service uniform was pressed with such surgical precision, it could have filed a grievance on its own. My ribbons were aligned, my nameplate was level, and my hair was pinned so tightly it qualified as structural engineering. Yet Eleanor Pembroke looked at me as if I'd tracked motor oil across her imported marble. Behind her, the Pembroke foyer was teeming with people who used the word summer as a verb. Men in navy blazers clutched crystal tumblers and laughed with practiced volume near the staircase. Women in satin gowns leaned in, whispering with the careful, predatory smiles of people who collected secrets like fine china. A string quartet was tucked beside the grand piano, playing something expensive and utterly forgettable. Above it all, suspended from the second-floor balcony, was a white floral banner with gold lettering, Genevieve and Julian, my baby sister's pre-wedding cocktail party. Apparently the theme was old money, new teeth, and no military sisters in sight. I shifted my canvas duffel higher. It was sun-faded, scuffed, and still marked with a strip of green tape from my last transit. Inside were 3 uniforms, a cracked paperback, 2 deployment orders, and a small, encrypted black drive, sewn into the lining by a supply sergeant in Germany who owed me a favor. That drive was worth more than anyone in that room could fathom. I didn't fully grasp its contents yet, only that Colonel Therne Blackwood had handed it to me before I left the operations center, telling me, "Major Pembroke, keep your personal records cleaner than your enemies expect." At the time, it sounded like simple advice. Later, it would be the reason a ballroom full of Boston's elite stopped breathing in unison. But in that foyer, all I had was a sore shoulder, 22 hours of sleep deprivation, and a mother blocking my path as if I were a vagrant trying to infiltrate a museum after hours. "What are you doing here in that attire?" she whispered. Her voice was low but not low enough. Eleanor had mastered the stage whisper years ago, designed to humiliate one person while giving everyone else the thrill of pretending they hadn't heard it. I looked down at my uniform, then back at her. "Hello to you too, Mother." Her mouth tightened. Her pearls sat in 3 perfect rows, each one likely worth more than my monthly housing allowance. She stepped closer, carrying the scent of gardenias and sharp white wine. "You look like low-rent warehouse security," she said. "Go put your bag by the service entrance and stay out of the corporate photos." For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard her. Not because it was out of character, but because some stubborn, foolish part of me that had survived childhood dinners and holiday insults still expected a mother to behave like a mother when her daughter returned from an 18-month active duty deployment. I had spent that deployment in a windowless cyberintelligence facility where the coffee was sludge, and the shifts stretched until the days blurred into one long, high-stakes blur. I had slept with my phone against my chest because data packets don't respect time zones, and my family's first concern was whether my uniform matched Genevieve's color palette. "Service entrance?" I asked. Eleanor smiled, a thin, toothless expression. "Don't be dramatic, Vanessa, you always do this." That was her favorite sentence. "You always do this." It was a catch-all weapon, deployed whenever I dared to speak up, ask questions, or establish boundaries, anything that might cause her cocktail napkins to tremble. A laugh drifted from the ballroom. Genevieve stood by the fireplace in a cream-colored dress that looked simple in the way only a $6,800 garment can. Julian, her fiancé, had his hand on the small of her back like he was presenting a luxury condo to a prospective buyer. Genevieve spotted me. She blinked, then offered a tiny, perfunctory smile, not the joy of a sister, but the mild annoyance of a delivery arriving late. "Oh," she called out, loud enough for heads to turn. "You made it." I had been invited by email 3 weeks prior. Not by my sister or parents, but by Meredith, the event planner, who had accidentally copied me after typing *V. Pembroke into the wrong field. My mother had followed up with a 3-line message stating the party was intimate, formal, and not a military function. I had replied with 2 words, "I'll be there." No one had responded. My father appeared near the bar, his silver hair immaculate, his hand wrapped around a glass of bourbon. Sterling Pembroke, CEO of Pembroke Properties, could spot a zoning loophole at 50 yards, but somehow managed to miss his eldest daughter standing 10 feet away in full uniform. Or perhaps he hadn't missed me. Perhaps ignoring me was just the family version of eye contact. He checked his watch, that was all. Alina leaned in again. Your sister has important people here tonight. Investors, board members. We aren't turning this into one of your military pity displays. I laughed, I couldn't help it. A pity display? Her eyes flashed. Yes, the uniform, the bag, the exhausted face. You've always had a gift for making your sacrifices look like an invoice. That landed. Not because it was clever, it was just the sort of line wealthy women practiced in mirrors, but because I had in fact been paying their invoices for years. The $1,243 emergency dental bill Genevieve forgot after a ski trip. The $3,600 retainer my father needed for a private tenant dispute. The $812 hotel charge my mother swore was a card error, despite the reservation being under her name and including a * radiant renewal spa package. I paid them all. I told myself families were complicated. That was my mistake. I had confused silence with nobility when in reality it looked like permission. I adjusted my duffel and looked past Alina toward the staircase. The house looked the same in the expensive ways and different in the ones that mattered. New flowers, new portraits, new furniture that felt like it required a credit check just to sit on. But the banister still bore the small dent from when I fell at 13, carrying Genevieve's science fair display because she had hand fatigue. I had built the project. She had won the blue ribbon. My mother had called that teamwork. I'm going upstairs, I said. I need 10 minutes. Alina moved, blocking me again. No. You'll use the back hallway and leave that bag where staff won't trip over it. Staff, I repeated. Mother, I live here. The words slipped out before I could check them. It was the irony of being trained to hold your tongue under pressure. Sometimes the most dangerous truths are the ones that escape by accident. Alina's expression turned arctic. No, Vanessa. You were * raised here. A nearby conversation died. Someone cleared their throat. The quartet played on. Musicians at these parties are trained like emergency responders. Do not react unless the building is actually on fire. Genevieve glided over, holding champagne she likely hadn't paid for. Julian followed with a smile that belonged on a bank brochure. Vanessa, Genevieve said, eyeing my uniform. Wow, full costume. It's called a uniform, I corrected. Right, sorry. You know me, civilian brain. Julian extended a hand. Major Pembroke. Good to finally meet you. His handshake was firm in that artificial, overcompensated way men use when they believe pressure equals character. His cufflinks were gold, his watch was too shiny, and his smile held a second too long. I've heard a lot about you, he said. I doubt that, I replied. Genevieve laughed, but her eyes narrowed. Alina snapped her fingers at a house attendant, Louis. He had worked for my parents since I was in high school. Back then, I used to help him carry folding chairs after fundraisers my mother called community outreach. Please. Open access, Alina commanded. Louis looked mortified. Vanessa, he said quietly. I've got it, I said, bypassing him. I had carried heavier things than canvas and uniforms. I had carried family excuses. I had carried debt. Alina stepped back, but just before I passed, she tapped 2 fingers against my sleeve. Not through the main hall. I looked at her hand. She recoiled as if burned. That tiny motion communicated more than a speech ever could. My uniform was clean enough for a military ceremony, clean enough for a commanding officer, and clean enough to represent my country. But it wasn't clean enough for my mother's marble floor. I turned toward the side corridor. Behind me, I heard Genevieve whisper, "This is why we didn't want her in the photos." And Julian answered, "We'll manage it." Not her. I reached the side door, pausing by the floor-to-ceiling gold-framed mirror meant for guests to admire themselves. I saw my reflection. 34, shoulders squared, eyes weary, uniform perfect, the strap of my duffel cutting a red line into my palm. For the first time all night, I didn't look like a daughter coming home. I looked like evidence waiting to be filed. Louis opened the side door. Cold air and a light, steady rain greeted me. I turned back once. My mother stood in the foyer, chin lifted. My father was back to his bourbon. Genevieve was posing for a photographer. Julian watched me over the rim of his glass. Alina gave me a final, dismissing nod, the same way she'd dismiss a contractor who had parked in the wrong spot. I stepped out. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, followed by the definitive sound of a deadbolt sliding home. Standing in the cold drizzle, my boots on the wet stone, I finally understood. They hadn't forgotten I was family. They had simply decided I was only useful when I was invisible. I didn't knock again. I walked around the side. The kitchen entrance had never been meant for family. It was for caterers, florists, and delivery drivers. Tonight, 2 refrigerated vans were parked there, doors open. Louis held the kitchen door for me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You don't owe me an apology," I said. "No," he answered, "but somebody should." Inside, the kitchen was a hive of organized chaos, waiters polishing glasses with a military precision that would have impressed my sergeants. Nobody stared. Nobody asked why I was entering through the back. The staff simply nodded. It was ironic that the people my parents paid were the only ones who showed me any respect. I slipped through the hallway toward the main staircase, climbing slowly. I wanted 10 minutes of peace. I reached the second floor and grabbed the brass knob of my childhood bedroom. My hand closed on empty air. I blinked. I genuinely wondered for a second if I had hallucinated the architecture. The door was gone. The wall had been opened up, merging my bedroom with the guest suite to create an oversized walk-in closet. Illuminated glass shelves housed hundreds of shoes, heels, boots, designer boxes from Paris and Milan. A digital inventory screen glowed near the entrance, listing categories like bridal weekend and European honeymoon **. Genevieve hadn't borrowed my room, she had erased it. I stepped inside. The hardwood floor remained. I recognized the scratch near the window where I dropped my desk chair during high school finals, but everything else, gone. The bookshelf my grandfather built. The desk where I'd written my West Point application, the blue quilt my grandmother had hand-stitched, even the clicking ceiling fan was gone. A sales tag hung from a shelf, Pembroke Luxury Interiors Bridal Collection Installation. Invoice total $48,620. I exhaled. $48,000 to ensure no evidence remained that another daughter had ever lived there. I pushed open the sliding balcony door. Below in the garden, cardboard boxes sat in the rain, my life tossed out like trash. I knelt beside them. The cardboard was sodden, falling apart. Inside, a framed academic award with cracked glass, debate medals, an old calculator, and the stuffed bear my grandmother had won me at a carnival when I was 8. Its left ear was missing. I picked up a frame, West Point Leadership Excellence. The rainwater had turned the signature into a blue blur. My grandmother used to dust that frame every Sunday, saying, "Your accomplishments deserve clean glass, sweetheart. Not because the awards matter, but because the effort does." I kept digging. Every handful of soaked junk felt like a piece of my soul being discarded. Finally, I found a faded envelope addressed in my grandmother's handwriting. Margaret Ellison. My throat tightened. The paper smelled of cedar. "Vanessa, if you're reading this years from now, I hope you've learned something our family never did. Money can build beautiful houses, but it cannot build decent people. Choose dignity every single time." I tucked the letter into my jacket. Just then, a gust of wind scattered a stack of papers from the boxes. I scrambled to catch them: insurance forms, transcripts, tax returns. Then one document landed face up against my boot. Harbor National Savings. I frowned. This was my personal account. I wiped the rainwater off the page. Available balance $0. A withdrawal summary covered the balance. Transaction $96,470. Purpose: residential event enhancement contract. Authorized representative Sterling Pembroke. I laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound, a custom ice sculpture. My father had liquidated my entire life savings, money I'd earned working double shifts at a diner, scrubbing syrup off booths until midnight, to pay for an ice sculpture that would melt before the wedding reception even ended. I examined the signature on the attached power of attorney. It was close, too close. The angle of the V in Pembroke drifted upward, an error I never made. Someone had studied my hand. Someone had practiced. My pulse slowed, shifting into that cold, clinical calm I only felt before a combat jump. Panic was a waste of energy, evidence was a tool. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page: signatures, routing numbers, codes, timestamps. Never assume you get a second chance to document a crime. Footsteps approached. Louis stood in the doorway with a towel. He saw the ruined boxes and stopped. "They told me not to bring these inside," he admitted. "Who?" He hesitated, then answered. I nodded. No speech, no excuses, just facts. I slipped the bank statement into a waterproof sleeve. My father hadn't just stolen my money, he'd left behind a paper trail of his own deceit. And that, I realized, was far more valuable than the cash. 3 weeks later, back at the Secure Operations Center, I submitted a 17-page report on an authentication anomaly. My workstation locked. I reached for my personal phone in my locker. It buzzed instantly. High-priority fraud alert, new commercial debt detected. My stomach tightened. I opened the alert. Harbor Ridge Financing, commercial business expansion loan, amount $180,000. Borrower Vanessa Claire Pembroke. The timestamp was 3 days prior while I was working a classified shift. This wasn't a mistake, it was a setup. I stepped into the communication room and called the creditor. After a verification process, I spoke to a representative named Rebecca. "Did your company approve a $180,000 loan under my name?" I asked. "Yes, Major Pembroke," she replied. "I did not authorize it." "I'm very sorry to hear that," she said, her tone shifting. "I'll need to send you the records." 10 minutes later, I had the file. I sat in the secure room, opening the encrypted package on my laptop. It was 48 pages of forgery, tax filings, utility bills, a driver's license. Then I reached page 26, the signature, my name signed electronically. I leaned in, my heart rate steady. It was beautiful, nearly perfect. But my real signature always featured a final P that angled downward by 2 degrees because of a habit I'd developed at West Point. This one was perfectly horizontal. This wasn't random identity theft. This was an inside job, someone who had access to my old documents, my home, and my personal history. Someone who believed I was either too far away or too spineless to notice. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated how much evidence I'd been collecting, and they had certainly forgotten that I was trained to find exactly what they were trying to hide.